cracked open in a single impossible moment. A silence so sharp it cut through every whispered doubt that had followed Myra Solis since the second she stepped inside. Judge Harrow froze mid-sentence, his voice collapsing into the air like a tower losing its last stone. Eyes darted toward Myra, expecting fear, apology, collapse, anything but the calm, unshaken expression she carried, as if she had rehearsed this exact second her entire life. A clerk dropped a folder. Someone in the gallery gasped. Another leaned toward a neighbor and whispered, barely breathing, "Did she really just say that?" The shock rippled outward, as if the walls themselves had absorbed her words and flung them back with amplified force. Reporters clutched their notepads tighter, sensing the spark of a headline they could hardly believe. Seasoned attorneys who once looked at Myra with dismissive pity now stared with something closer to alarm. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't even moved, yet the balance of power in the room teetered, trembling between the authority Harrow commanded and the truth she carried. No one could understand how someone who arrived without legal representation, without allies, without even a whispered introduction, had shaken the courtroom's foundation so easily for 14 minutes before that explosive instant. She had been invisible to nearly everyone. Drifting through the courthouse halls like a shadow people stepped around but never truly saw. She looked too young to stand alone against an institution built to intimidate, too calm to be preparing for confrontation. Security guards glanced her way with routine indifference, assuming she was lost. Clerks dismissed her with quick nods, already returning to their screens. And when she finally pushed open the heavy wooden doors of courtroom 3, the quiet skepticism that greeted her felt almost scripted, as if the room had already decided her role in this story. Before she uttered a single word, but the truth she carried did not belong to someone who blended into the background. It pressed against her ribs like a heartbeat too loud to ignore, urging her forward with every step. She had spent nights replaying this moment, imagining how it would feel to stand in front of the man who believed he could bend the law around his will. Even as doubt whispered warnings, something stronger propelled her. Every injustice she had witnessed, every voice that had been silenced, every door that had been slammed in her face gathered behind her now, forming an unseen chorus that walked with her into that courtroom. Still, no rehearsal could have prepared her for the electric shift that struck the moment she spoke. It wasn't the volume of her words that disrupted the rhythm of the courtroom, but the certainty woven through them, the unmistakable conviction of someone who had seen too much to be dismissed. Judges paused for many reasons: confusion, irritation, even arrogance, but rarely did they pause because the ground beneath their authority trembled. Harrow's hesitation was brief yet unmistakable, a fracture visible to anyone who knew how to look. And the gallery, once restless and bored, leaned in, as if pulled by an invisible thread. Nobody realized how quickly the moment would escalate, how her quiet strength would rattle the very man who believed himself untouchable. What began as a routine proceeding had twisted into something unrecognizable, and every person in the room sensed they were witnessing the first crack in a fortress long thought impenetrable. Myra stood alone, yet she seemed larger than the fear surrounding her, anchored by a purpose only she fully understood. And as the stunned silence deepened, a single truth hovered over them all, waiting to detonate. This was only the beginning for everyone watching that day. When Myra first stepped through the courthouse doors, she felt the building breathe against her, an ancient institution exhaling a warning she could almost taste. The marble floors amplified every uncertain footstep she took, turning her quiet entrance into an echo she couldn't control. She clutched her bag tighter, aware that she didn't look like anyone who belonged in a place where power spoke its own language. People swept past her with the brisk confidence of those accustomed to being heard, while she lingered in the spaces between their certainty, forcing herself forward even as doubt pressed at her ribs. She wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't wealthy. She had no firm behind her name. She was one woman walking into a battle no one expected her to win, and every instinct screamed that she should turn back. Yet she kept moving, driven by a purpose heavier than fear, even though fear followed her like a shadow with a hand on her shoulder. The courthouse air carried whispers about Judge Harrow, none of them comforting. Stories drifted from clerk to clerk, painting him as a figure who crushed challengers with a smile that never reached his eyes. His rulings had left seasoned attorneys trembling, and Myra had overheard one describe him as a storm wrapped in a robe. She repeated his name in her mind like a warning. Harrow, the judge who dismantled people who dared question him. Harrow, who sat atop decades of unchallenged authority. Harrow, who would not blink before ending her case and her courage in a single motion. Each step toward his courtroom felt like stepping deeper into a lion's den. One she had entered with no armor except determination and a sealed envelope pressing against her palm. That envelope was the only thing giving her the strength to keep moving. She had spent years gathering what lay inside it, evidence she wasn't sure she would ever have the courage to present. The weight of it felt like a heartbeat, steady, demanding, alive. She walked past lawyers laughing at private jokes, security guards exchanging casual glances, and assistants juggling armfuls of files that seemed to carry more authority than she ever had. None of them noticed her, and maybe that was her only advantage. If they believed she was insignificant, they wouldn't see the storm she carried. She slipped into the hallway leading to courtroom 3, her breath catching as she imagined how the judge would react if he saw what she brought. She reminded herself that the truth mattered more than intimidation. Even if intimidation stood 10 feet tall in a black robe. Her hands trembled as she approached the courtroom doors, the polished wood reflecting a distorted version of her face. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself, reminding her heart that retreating now would destroy everything she had fought for. She whispered a quiet promise to the brother whose memory had fueled this journey, then pushed the doors open with the fragile courage of someone choosing justice over safety. The room greeted her with a cold indifference that stung more than hostility. Attorneys glanced up briefly before dismissing her. The judge's bench loomed like a mountain sculpted to intimidate. Rows of spectators murmured among themselves, uninterested in the quiet woman slipping into the room. She took her seat, feeling the envelope pulse like a second heartbeat, urging her to stay grounded even as every part of her wanted to collapse beneath the weight of the moment. The stakes tightened around her like a grip as she waited for her case to be called. She replayed the path that had brought her here, the sacrifices, the late nights, the endless doubt. She reminded herself why she couldn't walk out. She repeated the truth she carried, letting it steel her spine. And, as the bailiff called her name, she rose with the quiet resolve of someone who had nothing left to lose, except the chance to make a corrupt system face what it had tried to bury. She stepped forward with the envelope in hand, unaware that beyond the fear, beyond the uncertainty, a deeper danger waited for her, one she never could have anticipated. Because what Myra didn't know was that this case wasn't just dangerous. It was rigged before she even arrived.